Amazing stories of survival are emerging from the ruins of the Fox Cities tornado. And tonight we have a closer look at what happened inside that beloved Menasha business, Manderfield. Ashley Robinson tells us more about some intense moments.
When you work side by side every day, you become a team. And during the peak of last week's tornado, two teenage employees at Manderfield's bakery proved just how far they would go to protect their teammates. Last Monday, a tornado destroyed Manderfield's bakery, collapsing walls and shattering glass. Employees 18-year-old Corbin Simmons and 16-year-old Elliot Richards were quick to lead their three older coworkers downstairs. But after 20 tense minutes in the dark, they realized they needed to get out.
The first thing that I experienced was my ears started popping, just a change in the pressure, I guess. And then we could hear the wind blowing, and then all of a sudden the glass shattering and the insulation just falling down the stairs.
The teenagers were able to guide their coworkers out of the destroyed building, but they didn't stop there. They continued down the street, helping neighbors in need. Elliot's mom, Lisa, recalls her son describing the desperate scene down the street and how he helped a neighbor he refused to leave behind.
There was a little girl that got hurt. He said when we got home that she hurt her head, and he made sure that she was safe before he left her side to come home and make sure we were safe.
The bakery's physical structure may be destroyed, but the team here is still whole, thanks to the quick thinking of their two youngest crew members. In Menasha, Ashley Robinson, Action 2 News.